It's time to accelerate. Hi, I'm your host, Andy Paul. Join me as I host conversations with the leading experts in sales, marketing, sales automation, sales process, leadership, management, training, coaching, any resource that I believe to help you accelerate the growth of your sales, your business, and most importantly, you. Hello and welcome to the show. I am excited to talk with my guest today. Joining me is Kevin Craine. He's host of his own podcast, The Everyday MBA, and he's an expert in creating killer knowledge leadership content. You know, we're living in the age of content, and if you're in business, regardless of the industry or irrespective of the size of your company, creating compelling content that helps differentiate you and your company in the eyes of your potential prospects is an absolute must, an essential part of any plan to grow your business. So how you go about creating this content is really important, and my guest today, Kevin Craine, is going to help us sort it all out. So Kevin, how you doing?
I'm doing great, Andy. Thanks a lot for having me.
Well, thanks for joining us. So before we get into the detail about content and so on, take a minute, introduce yourself.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I'm Kevin Craine. I am the host of Everyday MBA and the proprietor of Craine Communications Group. As you mentioned, I'm a writer and a content creator and a podcaster, and I help folks create knowledge leadership content for themselves and their businesses and to further their success.
So I'm curious about the term. You use knowledge leadership content. I mean, usually we hear this phrase, thought leadership content. So in your mind, is there a difference between the two?
Well, I guess it's a bit semantics, but knowledge leader, to me, is a person, you could call a thought leader is the same, but a knowledge leader is a person that's adding value to the world, that has a leadership position, as an expert resource, one that folks come to for advice or inspiration. And, that's why I think knowledge is perhaps a little better term for it.
Yeah, well, I like it. I mean, I hadn't really thought about it until prepping for the interview. And I was thinking, gosh, thought leadership maybe perhaps is just a little too theoretical, right? Whereas knowledge is something that combines sort of the practical with the theory, if you will.
I guess as a consumer, I'm certainly interested in people's thoughts, but I'm interested in becoming educated and learning knowledge. And so from that point of view, I'm looking to gain knowledge, not necessarily always hear everyone's thoughts.
So it's okay to give me the theory, but give me something I can actually do with it, right?
Yes.
So yes. You identify 7 characteristics of effective knowledge leadership content, or thought leadership content, if you will. But I mean, I'd like to go through those because they're really interesting, and I actually had some questions about them as we go through it. So the first you talk about is the content. The first characteristic of the 7 characteristics that effective content needs to have is it needs to be value add. Now, that seems somewhat a little self-evident on some hands, but maybe not. So, I mean, tell us exactly what you meant by what is value add in this case.
Well, it may seem self-evident, but in fact, my opinion is that most of the content being created today and being put out isn't necessarily value-added content. It's a lot of clutter. I have many clients. I work for many, many clients, Fortune 100 companies all the way down to individuals and small startups, and they're all interested in creating content for one reason or another. It's not always thought leadership content. It's not always value-added content. I have one client now, a big company I won't name, but they're very interested in having me create content and get it out by the end of the year, which is in just the next few weeks. Yet we really haven't defined why that content needs to be created, what the value is to it.
What the value is to the consumer, the person.
To the consumer. Why are we even, what are we saying and why are we saying it? Those questions have still not yet been answered, but yet we want to create all of this content, this clutter. We got to get it out there. It's got to be a blog. We got to have a white paper. We got to have social media. And
it's like, who cares, right? I mean,
so who cares?
Right.
So to be honest, as a content creator, I'm happy to be paid to create content. Not always does it fulfill all of my ideals and what it should be. I'm contracted to do so, and if my customer wants me to create content and get going, then that's what I'll do. But my question really is, what is the value that is being provided by this content? If it doesn't have a value to our recipient, our reader, our listener, then isn't it then just amounting to more chatter? And so what I mean by that is content that is value add brings something to your reader or your consumer. either some sort of knowledge now that is transferred to me or some sort of inspiration. And maybe it helps me in some practical ways. And I know you do this, Andy, some very practical advice, things that folks can take action on that provides value that may or may not necessarily overtly position me or you or whoever in a marketing way. It's a slower sort of thing. We're not saying, here's the value, you should buy our product. That's not what we're talking about.
No, but the value comes based on where the buyer is in their stage of their buyer's journey, right? I mean, they could be right at the beginning, they're beginning to gather information, maybe identify what their needs might be. And there's content that's certainly appropriate at that stage that's value add.
Perfect. And you're a perfect example of all of that and how that works. So I believe that your philosophies are exactly point on with that, because it has to have some sort of resonance to your recipient at that time of their need. And for me to pay attention to you when it comes time to buy a product or engage your services, I believe there needs to be a level of trust and credibility built there. And how am I going to do that if I'm not providing value to you as a potential customer? It's more likely that if I'm not doing that, especially early on in that cycle or that funnel part, I'm just going to start ignoring you as someone that's just providing a bunch of chatter that I'm not interested in.
Exactly. And you can translate this for people that are listening to the show and they're thinking about, starting to put together a content marketing plan and what's the plan for developing value-added content, is think about it as and I talk about this from a sales perspective, even when you're a sales rep talking to a prospective buyer, is that, they invest some of their time in you, right? So think about your content from the same thing. Person reading it's going to invest some of their time, and if there's nothing of value for them there, then the next time you have a content piece, they're not going to give you any time.
Well, and isn't that always the principle behind sales? So if I'm sitting down with a customer and I'm trying to find a way to do business, and that's fine. Why would they do business with me? What does my product or service bring to them that gives them value, that makes their job or their lives easier? That now we all of a sudden have a start of a need, right?
Yeah.
Something that's a real need that they really want. It's a whole lot easier to sell someone something when they really want it. When they really don't want it, it's almost impossible.
Yeah. So, you have to think about that content from the beginning as you write a piece, unlike the customer you're talking about, is it has to have value. You need to be able to identify what the value is going to be to the consumer. And if you don't do that, and then you can't see that in that piece, then for God's sake, don't publish it. Whatever it is, it's a video or a blog, just don't do it. And I talk about in one of my blog pieces is, empty sales calories, I call it, where people read, or people publish and people consume at least once, lots of blog articles and so on that don't fit any of the characteristics that we're going to talk about here today, starting with no value add. And I call that empty sales calories, and just try to avoid that.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more.
All right. So next thing you talk about is make sure the content must be actionable. Now I interpret that to mean that effective content can't just be theoretical, right? I mean, we're talking about the difference again between thought leadership and knowledge having some practical bent to it. So for content of value, you not only have to say why you should do it, but you also have to give the how.
Absolutely. And it's going to be a lot more value added to me if there is something actionable I can do, right? I mean, that's part of making it value add. And one of the things that I do purposely with my podcast, Everyday MBA, is to sum up each interview with 5 action items that folks can do. And my pattern is starting today and for the rest of the week and beyond to take advantage of whatever we're talking about. Done it with your interview on my show. Mm-hmm. Lots of great ideas came out of that. Lots of great actionable items. And I got to tell you, Andy, it takes extra effort for me to create those and go through there and think that it's extra time that I'm not compensated for. But it is that value added part, because now listeners, if they choose, can actually take action on those 5 items or whatever, and I'm building that value add, that credibility, and so forth. Now, with a sales kind of approach, of course, what's the call to action, right? What do you want your reader to do when they read your content or listen to your content or whatever? What is it that you want them to feel? What is it that you want them to physically do? Maybe the call to action or the actionable part is for them to just be feeling the way that you do. It might be maybe a political kind of thing, or an opinion changing thing that you want that action to be a change of opinion, or maybe the next action is as simple as enlisting for that next webinar that you're putting on about your product. The simple standard sorts of calls to action. Or what is it that you want your readers to do or your listeners to do in terms of building their own strategies? What's their next call to action? What's the next best step? Now that I'm listening to Andy Paul and I'm inspired, now what do I do, right? And so without that leading on, you're missing a huge part of the equation.
Yeah, and I think part of that also can be summarized just as you said, a feeling, but as curiosity. Let's say define that feeling as curiosity, right? As you've done your job in content, if you've also given somebody, maybe it's not, hey, go out today, you need to do these two things, but one of it could be is that, maybe they're thinking, maybe I should be doing these things, right?
Yes.
I mean, that can be as powerful and cause action to be taken.
And how much content do you see? I know I see it every day that is not value added and doesn't have anything that I can take action on. So
constantly.
What's the point? What's the point? I've read this. I don't really have any value in it, and it doesn't compel me to do anything. So again, why did we bother to create it and clutter the world with it?
And I wonder about that because I've got a couple episodes on my Fridays. Of every Friday, I've got a standard guest, Bridget Gleason, who joins me on what I call Frontline Fridays, and Bridget's a VP at a high-profile startup in Silicon Valley, and sometimes we take on some of those blogs that seem to have no value and deconstruct them because there are people that follow it and they're not getting anything out of it.
And I would say that you're taking a risk when you issue content like that doesn't really provide any value, is not actionable. Then you're really risking a downside to where now I'm going to maybe consider you to be someone that I'm going to mute in my stream.
Well, yeah,
right?
Interesting example I was talking to somebody who's at a software company, and I won't identify because the person who's the subject of the story will identify themselves readily enough. But they were saying that they were surveying their customers about, they sent out newsletters, a software company sent out newsletters, in disciplined fashion every week, and marketing emails and so on. They surveyed their customers about how they liked their content, and the customers said basically there's no value in it at all. In fact, the only content from your company we pay attention to is a guy in your engineering team that sends out his own newsletter about your product, and we consume that voraciously.
Because there's value.
Because there is value.
And
right?
action.
Right.
Yes.
There's nothing else in the... Okay, so next element you talk about it, and this one you need to explain to me a bit, is use the word authentic. Okay, value add, actionable. Now, the third thing is the content has to be authentic. Now, what did you mean by that?
Well, especially for folks that want to be perceived as a knowledge leader, right? I'm trying to be authentic now. In fact, I'm maybe saying things that I may have considered something to be guarded about saying only a few months ago, because I want to just be truthful, authentic, and upfront about the way I feel. You're asking me my opinion, so I'll give it to you. Authentic. How many times do you hear content like, it's the best product that will it will improve your life in these grand ways. You can just tell it's BS, I guess is what I'm saying.
We guarantee, I saw one a few months ago for sales. We guarantee 321% improvement. And I'm sitting there going, okay, it wasn't 300%, it's 321%. It was so precise that you're like, that's such BS.
It's yes. And you know it when you read it, In other words, I guess what I'm getting at is BS when you hear it, right? Mm-hmm. Everybody does. Mm-hmm. So when you write it, you should see it for yourself too. I mean, is it really authentic? Are you really trying to be helpful? Is it something that you do believe in? Or are you just blowing smoke? And so many companies and individuals, they just blow smoke just to put content out and just to say, well, we've got to say something about our product. And I had a client come to me just this week, and they said, do you have anything we can put in a press release? Because we've got only a certain amount of press releases left in our service until the end of the year, and we're gonna lose, if we don't put something out, right?
Well, yeah.
So, dude, what am I supposed to do? Just so
we all showed up for work. We had perfect attendance record this week.
We did. So, is that really going to be an authentic communication, or is it going to be something that you cobble together, kind of BS a little bit, just to put something out? That's what I'm getting at. There's no authentic motivation behind it, or purpose, or value, or anything really of importance to say. It's just, again, sort of chatter out in the world that, I don't think is going to help anybody.
No, and I think the lesson for people listening that have thinking about creating content or wondering why they're not creating more content is that if you are the slightest bit uncomfortable, right? If there's just a little bit of something saying to you, well, like 321%, somebody's really got challenges for that, then again, it's probably not the right thing to put out. It's probably not authentic. So, and customers are skeptical of claims anyway, right? Yes. So if you're going to make a claim, for goodness sakes, make it something that seems possible.
And for individuals, I think authentic can really resonate. Say an individual like Andy Paul. You resonate, or someone else resonates more loudly, and shines more brightly, the more authentic that you really are as a person, right? And so people get that. Some of the knowledge leaders that we look to are even outrageous, like Gary Vaynerchuk or someone like that. Mm-hmm. And I think that's authentic or whatever.
Well, but he is very authentic, right?
I mean, man, what you get, Jeffrey Hazlett,
right?
Think big, act bigger. That's Jeffrey, right? Now, Jeffrey could act more like what you'd expect, or be more circumspect, or whatever, or he could just wear his boots and be the cowboy and do his thing. And what happened when he started doing that? He became more noticed, and things good started happening. And so I think for all of us, this whole idea of being authentic to ourselves and really, portraying a knowledge leader that is really you, I think is a powerful advantage.
I agree. Okay, we're going to take a short break here. Now, before we go to the break, though, I'm gonna test you a little bit here, because you're a business owner, right?
Yes.
So I'm going to ask you a question that I've asked all of my guests so far. And granted, a lot of them have been sales experts and so on, but you're a business owner, so this will something you should be able to answer here. So here's hypothetical scenario. I'll get your answer after we come back from the break. So you've been hired as a new sales manager at a company whose sales are stagnating and desperately need to be turned around. And senior management really has got to focus on you. So you come on board. What are the two things you would do in the first week that could have the biggest impact? So think about that, and we'll come back after the break. My guest today, Kevin Craine. We'll be right back. Hi, this is Andy. Connect and Sell is used by sales reps at nearly 1,000 companies, including hundreds of technology startups and several Fortune 500 companies, to overcome the challenges of getting prospects on the phone. Companies using Connect and Sell grow their revenues faster by enabling their sales reps to have more sales conversations in 90 minutes than they could otherwise achieve in an entire week. Connect and Sell can be deployed directly to your sales reps, or you can take advantage of their outbound on-demand service, which delivers qualified prospect meetings scheduled directly on your sales reps' calendars. Visit connectandsell.com to learn more about how Connect and Sell can start filling your pipeline today. Welcome back. Joining me today is my guest, Kevin Craine. He is the host of the great podcast, Everyday MBA. I'm not saying that just because I was on it, but I was. I had a great time. There's great guests he has on it, as well as he's founder of the Craine Group, specialize in content creation, compelling content creation for corporate clients. So before the break, I'd ask you a question. Hypothetical scenario. You're a new sales manager at a company that desperately needs to turn their sales around. What two things would you do in the first week that would have the biggest impact?
Well, that's a good question. I think two things. Number one, I would ask, I'm the sales manager, so I have a sales team. Mm-hmm. I would ask that entire sales team, perhaps each individually or as a group or both, what they think we should do. I would turn my role around and say, you lead me. Tell me what you think. Mm-hmm. Because often great ideas are left unheard in organizations because of just the culture or the pecking order or whatever. Sometimes folks have great ideas that they've been trying to get attention but haven't. I know as a consultant, when I've come into organizations, that's generally the first thing I do because a lot of great ideas are already there. They just haven't been noticed. So I'd do that, number one, see what came out, and then, make a judgment about what I thought was good and what I wouldn't do.
Mm-hmm.
Then I would also look to do something different, completely different than what we'd done in the past. If we're going in the downward direction, then what we're doing now isn't necessarily working too well. So what can we do that would be the opposite of that? And indeed, maybe be something, purposely different or radical or attention-getting or to a different demographic or something along those lines. So look for something different.
Okay, great. I like it. All right. So we've just gotten through talking about making your content authentic. We've gone through value add. We've gone through actionable. We've gone through authentic. Next on your list was credible. Now, to me, this is interesting because credibility is really in the eye of the beholder, right? I mean, it's something that's perceived by the receiver or the reader, if you will. So what are the keys for making content credible?
Well, again, it's kind of that BS meter, we talked about in the authentic part, but credible. Well, you mentioned it's going to improve by 301% or something. That didn't resonate as credible to you, right?
No.
Now, how do you do that? Well, maybe you recouch that same figure. Maybe you say, recent research from, IDC reports that, the average increase was 301%. You can do that too. Maybe your results may vary, but you can do that too. And here's how.
So pulling in research and sources other than yourself, I think is what you're saying. Is
other than yourself,
right.
But more than just spitting stats out, which we like to do, and it helps. But also the sort of, you maybe heard where I said, well, and you can do it too, or your results may vary, but you can do it too, and here's how. So in other words, hey, we're with you. I have my arm around you. It's like, hey, it's 301%. I don't know. Could be 299, could be 100%. I don't know. It's all good. Your results will vary, but here's how you do it. And so that lends a credibility to the discussion, whereas before we were just spitting out a stat that didn't have any attribution, or we might have spit out a stat with some attribution, but it was really sort of arcane and isolated, whereas we mix it all together in a more cohesive discussion, the credibility, I think, goes up.
Yeah. So I'm certainly, third-party validation certainly helps in terms of, as you said, research or stats, even social proofs. I mean, if they're available and it's relevant to what you're writing about, can also be a way to add credibility to your content. Credibility.
And as possible, I know I write a lot of content for organizations and corporations, and as possible, let's let our customers do our talking for us. And, the old boring case study has been around forever. However, so much content is created without that customer attribution. In other words, we could be writing this wonderful white paper about your product or service, solution brief, and giving stats and really explaining some value-added steps and all of that. But still, it's in isolation from anyone that's done it in the real world. And if you're creating content to resonate with a potential customer, wouldn't you love to have an existing customer that's happy, testifying that, yes, indeed, this is what we did. These were some of our results, and that builds credibility as well. And one of the things that I've been doing for my clients, in addition to writing that kind of content, is doing audio interviews with customers, just like we're doing now. But I could be saying, Andy, you adopted XYZ product 6 months ago. Can you tell us a little bit about some of the results? And then you go, I love XYZ product. It saved me 301%.
Sure. Well, yeah.
There you go.
Those are 321. Well, I think that really sort of summarized a lot of that. And what I would say is that to get credibility in your content is you need to incorporate stories into it. And, stories about your customers, stories about, let's start with customers, right? How it works, so that people can see themselves, in that content, right? They can see themselves in the story. So suddenly they can start relating to it in a way that they won't be able to do if you're just sort of spraying facts and figures at them.
That is just such a great comment, Andy. You're so right. And in fact, as a writer, what I might do is, instead of saying companies can save 321%, I might say you can save 321%. It's just a slight change, and as you read through content in the future, is it couched that way? Well, sort of off over here, companies or organizations can do it, or is it you? So when you're speaking to that person, speak to you, that one person that's listening or reading.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I think, again, especially if you're telling stories, you want to have that focal point on somebody in your mind, that one person sort of in your mind that you're addressing, and the use of the more familiar you rather than the generic, hey, companies benefit by, I agree, is way more powerful. I see much more interaction, engagement with content that's like that versus the sort of impersonal company. So,
yes.
Yeah, so that's great. So okay, we've gone through credibility. Now we're talking about precision. And that's funny. You said knowledge leadership needs to be precise, and I sort of think that if it's actionable, then you're providing steps to implement it, and that implies a degree of precision. But I sometimes think maybe you're thinking about something different when you say precise or precision in content. So what do you mean by that?
By precise, what I mean is precise for your audience. I guess you could put audience there. Who are we talking to?
So targeted.
Well, targeted, sure. Yeah. We were talking about the you. Who is that you, right? Is it a highly technical person that knows all about computers and stuff like that? Well, then that's a different conversation than we might have with the senior vice president of marketing, who's really interested in the business or whatever. Or maybe you're talking to a small business owner as opposed to an enterprise, or you're talking to a woman as opposed to a man, or a young person, a millennial, say, as opposed to someone that's close to retirement age or an elderly person. All these factors should influence what you say and how you say it, even if the ideas remain the same.
Yeah, right. And that's a really...
Need to be precise.
Yeah, very precise. So I'm glad you explained it, because, again, very important for people listening as you're creating content. Could be just writing a blog article, could be, filming a video, but who are you addressing it to? You really need to have that persona or that avatar, people are using the terms interchangeably these days, defined in terms of the target, not just saying it's necessarily... Yeah, it's small businesses, but what type of small business owner? As you said, a man, woman, what's the age range? What are they interested in? It may seem like extra work, but it lends a precision and an authenticity, as we talked about before, and certainly credibility to your content if you have this person in mind when you're creating the content.
You have to ask yourself, who am I talking to? Why should they care? And what do I want them to do when they're done reading or listening?
Yeah, because once you've defined who they are, then you can answer that all-important question, which is, what's in it for them, right?
Yes.
And when they read this, we've gone through several characteristics which sort of address it, but bottom line is, what's in it for me or what's in it for them? Well, you sort of need to know who it is and what they're concerned about, and who they are, have an image of who they are to make sure that you are giving them something that's important.
Precisely.
Exactly.
No pun intended.
No pun intended, right? Not that we've been talking about precision. So, and sixth characteristic we talk about is consistent. And I'm sure I shouldn't say I'm sure. I'm assuming what you're talking about is that, and one of the great faults we see with content creation is that it's done on such a episodic and infrequent basis. To really have power and impact in your content, it has to be produced consistently.
Sure. Yeah. Fits and starts. It's like, the old direct mail days. I guess we still use direct mail.
Sure.
But direct mail, you can send one campaign out. Say I'm a dentist in the local Portland area here where I am, and I want to get all the kids in my neighborhood. And so I can target to moms in Southwest Portland that have kids. And I can do a great color piece, and I can have some value-added stuff and discounts, and I don't know. I can do a great job on that. I can send it out once and get nothing, and then go back to the writer and the designers and everyone involved and say, I didn't get anything out of that campaign. I think it's a waste of time. Any direct mail person will tell you, well, you don't get anything out of one campaign. You get results out of a consistent campaign over time, say over a year or so forth. So what I'm talking about content creation is, many of my clients they'll issue some great content, and then they'll stop and they won't do anything for the bulk of the year, maybe another one, and it's fits and starts. So I think you need to be consistently creating good knowledge leadership content in order to be considered a knowledge leader and have that come out on a consistent basis.
Well, I mean, because the consistency really becomes important because, as people listening to the show and they're thinking about their content strategy, is the goal of the content in large part is to build a relationship with somebody.
Yes.
And so, use the analogy of a relationship as you think about the frequency of your content creation is, you have somebody that you stay in touch with, let's say weekly, versus someone you call twice a year. Well, what's the difference in the relationship going to be?
Yes, absolutely.
And so that's a good way to think. I think that's a framework I encourage people to think about it in, is that, hey, you want to develop this relationship that you're in close, constant touch with these people, and they're counting on you. They're counting on you to be there with something to help them.
Well, a podcast is a great example of that, isn't it? We make a podcast and it's a weekly show or something, right? And so you're consistent, and you're consistent over time, and you're expecting that critical mass as a knowledge leader to build, and then people do come to depend on you and so forth. What if you regarded a podcast as you did an episode this week and then didn't do anything for 6 months until the next episode came about? That wouldn't make much of an impact. And so content creation, whether it's on a podcast or your blog or a newsletter or whatever you're doing, white papers, should be, consistent there. And otherwise, you're kind of really wasting your effort on that one time that you do it.
Well, and you're sending a real mixed message to prospective customers when you do this. I'll give an example that I look for all the time. Let's say somebody approaches me about being a partner or something of that nature, and I'll go to their website and I'll look at their blog. Mm-hmm. And if I see that they were sort of active blogging, but then they haven't blogged for 2 years, I'm like, okay, what's going on here, right? I mean, people are going to do that. They're going to say, look, if once you start doing it, you're creating content, you're really making a commitment to keep it up and keep doing it. And not just because you have to, but because there's a value and a benefit to you from doing that. And it's really a wasted investment if you spend time to, let's say, start a blog, and let's say you're blogging weekly or maybe twice a week, and you do that for a couple of years, and then you just stop cold turkey. Well, I said, if you're like me and you go to the website and you say, well,
are they out of business?
Yeah, are they out of business? What's going on? Are they having severe troubles? I mean,
or what's worse is you go and you see that they started a blog and they did, a handful of posts, maybe all on the same day, and then didn't do anything after that. So they didn't even have a 2-year history of content creation. They just had nothing, right? And then that really makes you think, well, they're not serious about being a knowledge leader. Or you'll see blogs that they're out there on a consistent basis, but it's all, like we were saying, it's all, BS, non-value added, it's just hype. Again, that's a backfire to me. Both of those things are a backfire. Don't do a blog if you're not going to be consistent. Don't do a blog if it's just going to be BS. Leave it off. It'd be better to have no blog, right? I think.
Well, and I think one of the big barriers for people with the blogging and the consistency is they think they don't have anything to say. And here's the deal. I mean, if you're an entrepreneur, you're a small business owner, in business, even a larger enterprise, of course you have something to say. You're servicing customers in a specific market, specific applications that you, at one level, are fairly passionate about. Otherwise, you wouldn't be in that business. There's an endless amount of stories to be able to tell about that prospective customers would find valuable. So never think that, gosh, there's never anything I can talk about, because all you have to do is maybe pick up an industry trade publication, right? And just choose an article and you think, well, I sort of agree with that, or maybe I don't completely agree. Write about it, or film a 1-minute video about it. I mean, it's something that simple. Or you see a tweet online, you're following somebody in your industry and they tweet out something. You click on the link, maybe there's a link in the tweet, you go to an article. Yeah, I sort of agree, don't agree. Well, hey, I'm going to write about that.
Well, and that's what I'm here for, because many folks don't have the time or the focus or maybe even the ability to do that. They're fighting fires, they're running their business. Maybe they're not really a great writer or whatever. Why not hire a writer, a content creator? It doesn't have to be me. Of course, it should be, but it could be anyone, right, to be on your team to assist you with that. And their job would be to do just like you're saying. Hey, there are lots of great stories to tell, and facilitate that process, ghostwrite, create content, on an ongoing, consistent basis. And that's the kind of program that I bring to my clients, where we look at these principles in the content creation, but we also put together processes and systems that create consistent content over different channels. We'll talk about diverse here in a second. So there's an ongoing program with someone on your team on the bench there, doing that and helping move that forward as you as an entrepreneur or business leader are then free to focus on the things that you need to do.
Right. Which is a great point, just to sort of, our economy's changed so much, right? That you really don't do all of this yourself, nor is it even really expected that you could. So there are resources like Kevin, as we've talked about here today, yourself, that are so readily available. I don't necessarily say that you're all inexpensive, but depending on, there's a budget for everything, right?
Completely affordable. Yeah, completely
affordable.
Yeah.
There's a resource for every budget. I've gone out and I scoped out the market in several different projects. I mean, so it's available to you. There's really no excuse for not being able to create it. So we'll go to the last point, 7.7, that your content has to be diverse. And again, I think what you were saying is that use more than one channel, right? If it's just a blog, just don't rely on a blog. Do something else in addition to it.
I think it should be all of the above. It should be blogging. You should be doing articles in trade magazines. You should be doing social media. You should be doing live presentations, podcasts, being a podcast host, a podcast guest. I mean, all of the above. Newspapers. Multi-channel, diverse. It's just like a stock portfolio. You want to be diversified, right?
You want to be balanced, right?
You want to be balanced and diversified, and the same thing is true with your content. So if it's consistent, it's diverse. You've got a program in place that moves it forward so that you don't do it in fits and starts. I think now you're talking about a tool that can really make a difference and impact.
Right. Great advice. Okay. So we're going to move to the last segment of the show where I give you some rapid fire questions. You can give me one-word answers or elaborate as you choose, okay?
Okay.
All right. So first question. You're a business owner. What's the most powerful sales tool in your arsenal?
Me. I think that's the powerful sales tool. I think if I can get in front of a potential client and really have a conversation about what their needs are and what I can do, usually I can close that engagement because of just the ability to talk one-on-one with that client and make it happen.
Yeah, it's your credibility, your authenticity, all of those things we talked about today. So, second question. Now, what's one tool you use for sales management that you can't live without?
Oh, for me, it's a thing called Schedule Once. There are others, but it's a web-based scheduler. I do so much of my work, all my work virtually, and so being able to provide someone with a link that, like I did for this show and for when we've interacted. Hey, Andy, great, no worries. Here, just click on this link, and you pick a time that works for you, that's available on my calendar. So we don't have to go back and forth and blah, blah, blah. And that tool is, like we were talking about, resources that are affordable. I mean, for pennies. That tool has, been a godsend for me and for the few dollars that I spend on that service. So Schedule Once or something like it has been really powerful for me.
Schedule Once.
Yes.
Once or one. Okay, Schedule Once. Okay, perfect. Who's your business role model?
Well, that's a good question. I think my business is a little different, to be honest with you, than most. I'm pretty diverse in what I do, in creating content and writing and podcasting, and I've branched podcasting out to, I've found a way to make money off of my ability to podcast when my podcast doesn't make any money.
But was there someone that's inspired you, though?
I think that certainly when it comes to podcasting, I think a fellow named John Lee Dumas has been an inspiration to me. You may have heard of him.
Me too. Oh,
yeah. And
I'm a member of Podcaster Paradise.
Oh, okay. Well, me too. Okay, I didn't know that, Andy. Okay, great. Podcast Paradise is really been an inspiration because of the support systems and the idea that podcasting is something that can be a viable business and a viable media today. And so, I really look up to John Lee, not necessarily for his show, although it's a great show. It's different than what I do. But here's a guy, and he's become a millionaire on the back of podcasting, and to me that's incredibly Yeah. And talk about also a model for value-added content. John Lee hasn't done it without being a super value-added person. He'll be the first to say to strive to be a person of value, not a person of success. And so from that point of view, he's been a pretty big inspiration and model for me.
Okay, excellent. Yeah, me too. I mean, I modeled much of my podcast after him and his resources. Yeah, if you join, here's an example, you join a mastermind group, and it is wall-to-wall value. I mean, there's no question you're getting what you paid for. It's fantastic, or more value than what you paid for. It's fantastic. So, what's one book that every person in marketing or sales should read?
Oh, wow. There's a lot of them because I talk to authors. Yours is, and not to pander.
Yours is certainly one. Go ahead and pander. That's fine.
Yours is certainly one, and all my guests. But, I would definitely refer to your listeners back to my show and your episode. I wish I had the number in front of me, but you can certainly find Andy Paul on Everyday MBA. And but one does come to mind. It's another one of my guests. It was Bonnie Harvey and Michael Houlihan, the founders of Barefoot Wine.
Right.
And they have a book out called The Barefoot Spirit. And really, it's got some great stories about how they took they had a client. They were a business consultant. They had a client that was going belly up and couldn't pay them except to give them grapes and bottling services. They were not familiar with the wine industry, but they took that opportunity and turned it into Barefoot Wine. And they have many great stories about how they did that along the way with some real grassroots sort of marketing and a different approach to the wine industry at the time when it was really stuffy. I won't get into all the details, but some super great stories. And I always recommend it because of the way that they proceeded and were a success, I think was unusual, and a lot of great tips there that can be used today still.
Okay. Here's a tough question. What's your favorite music to listen to sort of get you in the mood for an important business meeting or sales call?
Oh, wow. Well, I'm a musician, so I love music and play music. I'm a fingerstyle guitarist, and so when I'm really needing to concentrate and get pumped up, I will put on a guy named Tommy Emmanuel.
Oh, I love him. Love him.
The Jimi Hendrix of acoustic guitar.
Yeah. So, Australian guy.
Yeah. So Tommy E, that'd be the guy. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I can recommend that too. He's on my playlist too.
Okay, cool. Great.
Yeah, I love guitar. I love like Hawaiian slack key guitar.
Oh, yeah. Sure, you bet.
Huge fan of that. So, okay. So what's the first sales activity you do every day?
Oh, well, I drink coffee. That's the first thing. I try to be present and I try to do it well. I don't know if I do. On social media, I really like LinkedIn, for example, which is often overshadowed by some of the other outlets. But I get up in the morning and I hang out on social media for a little bit. I'll do my tweets, or I'll read my tweets and I'll maybe enter some tweets that I want to get out through the day. Mm-hmm. And I'll do LinkedIn and that kind of thing. I may post something. That's the time when I may post something out on LinkedIn as an article or something before I get too sidetracked with the heavy lifting of the day.
Perfect. Well, good. Well, it's been great talking to you. I want to thank my guest today, Kevin Craine, CEO of the Craine Group and host of the podcast called The Everyday MBA. Make sure you guys look that up. And Kevin, tell folks how they can find out more about you.
Well, thank you, Andy. You can find me at crainegroup.com. That's CRAINE, crainegroup.com. And Everyday MBA is at everyday-mba.com.
Excellent. Okay, and we'll have those links on our website. So remember, people, make it a part of your day every day to deliberately learn something new to help you accelerate your success. Subscribing to this podcast on iTunes or Stitcher is an easy way to make sure that you don't miss any of our conversations with top business experts like our guest today, Kevin Craine, who share their experience and expertise about how to accelerate the growth of your business. So thanks for joining us, and until next time, this is Andy Paul. Good selling, everyone. Thanks for listening to the show. If you like what you heard and want to make sure you don't miss any upcoming episodes, please subscribe to this podcast on iTunes or Stitcher.com. For more information about today's guest, visit my website at andypaul.com.